Okay, we are now recording to the cloud. So, welcome. This is the third in our speaker series, political science speaker series, and I'm Dr. Myers, aka Dr. Jam, for those of you who don't know me. So, our speaker today is Pam Tomber, who is now the Director of State Immigration Campaigns for FWD.US. I put there in the chat, I put the website there because you should check out their website. It's way cool. It's clean, it's beautiful. Anyway, that FWD is a bipartisan political organization that believes America's families, communities, and economy thrive more when more individuals are able to achieve their full potential. Pam was born in Lima, Peru, and immigrated with her family to the U.S. in 2001. How old were you, Pam? When you?
I was 11.
Was 11. She has dedicated her career organizing people power through state legislative policies across the country, empowering students to become participants in the electoral process, vote, and mentoring undocumented young adults. Prior to FWD.US, Pamela worked for Senator Cory Booker's special Senate election campaign in New Jersey and moved to Texas in 2014 to work with community leaders in African American and Latinx communities across Harris County. Her work is centered in community storytelling. Her goal is to elevate leaders in typically marginalized communities despite government barriers. Pamela continues to fight for dreamers like herself, undocumented family members, and her beloved Jersey. She currently lives in Washington, D.C. with her two toothless cats, they must be really old, and her dog. She actually graduated from Marist with a Bachelor of Arts in History. And were you in my Politics of Prejudice class many?
Yeah, I was. I did get a poli-sci minor, so.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, and it's been a while.
Yeah. So in front of you, I see a whole bunch of students from my Politics of Human Rights class and from other classes along the way. So they'll ask you questions, and are they allowed to interrupt you and to ask questions?
I think, yeah, it tends to happen. If it's a clarification question, like you don't understand the word, you can type it out, or you can do like a fist or, number one. I'll try not to use jargon and explain like the words as much as possible. But
okay, great. So why don't we start out with you telling, since you look like stories and you're a historian with the political science minor, tell us your story.
Well, thanks everyone for joining on a Saturday, and also thank you for honestly attending college in the middle of a pandemic. I just want to point the obvious. I work from home in the middle of a pandemic, and we have to organize in the middle of a pandemic. So let's empathize together in the regretful state of our world and our country. A little bit about me. I think Jam was able to hit the big points. I did move to the US when I was 11 with my family. I remember the whole process, being in an experience of like we had to go to the embassy and get our visas and our passports, because we did travel with tourist visas, and we knew that we were going to stay because my parents believed that we were going to have better opportunities in this country and they were going to create a better future for us. And that's the whole reason. And there may have been more reasons for it, there may have not. I think the point that I'm realizing is that people migrate for multiple reasons, and it's really personal to them, and if they don't share, they don't share. So it's also a tip for us in the future. But I wanted to move to the U.S. as a little kid. I think since I was 5, because I had family here, and I remember my cousin. They told me like this story of like my 5-year-old cousin already had a full ride to Harvard, and like he was gonna get a car. And I was like, I want a full ride to Harvard. I want to get a car, and I like going to school. Like going to school was the best thing for me. So I always wanted to come here. There was no doubt that if my parents hadn't made the move for me, I would have made the move for myself for school. We moved here. You can say I had like typical migrant story that we see on TV or on the news, that I had good grades, and then I realized I kind of always knew I wasn't documented. I just didn't know exactly the impact of it. We started seeing more of it during the Bush era. The formation of the Department of Homeland Security, formation of ICE came after 9/11. I started seeing a bit more during like the primaries in 2007, before Obama won in 2008. And it really hit me around that age that I could not afford to go to school. So I had to really fight. People, I managed to convince Maris to give me more than one scholarship. I still don't know how I did that, but you should fight if you're in that situation as well. And I was drawn to storytellers. I was drawn to the history of this country, and the learning moments that we had, but also how we hadn't learned from it. It was just a cycle of pain, but a cycle of hope, and really a fight. And I consider myself a very passionate person, and I didn't realize that all the things that I had studied in school at one point would be beneficial to how I would advocate in the real world. So story sharing for me is really important because it helps me connect with the person across the screen. I had dreams that I was going to travel the world and fight for human rights abroad, not knowing that like my fight was going to be in this country, and with good reasons. There's a lot more to do, not just for immigrants, not just for Native Americans, but for social justice for Black Americans, for Black migrants as well. And we can't fully win that fight if we don't understand a couple of the people behind it, and learn to empathize. So that's why storytelling and history for me is going to be important. And that's why I'm motivated in this fight. A little bit about the work that I do now. I actually, I was basically forced to do immigration because I wanted to vote, but I couldn't vote because I'm undocumented. So I started organizing people to go out and vote. And then I realized I don't just want to go out and tell people to vote for who I think should be there and pass immigration reform, but I actually want to pass immigration reform now. Like I need to, if I need to achieve this for myself, then I need to fight for immigration reform. So I was pushed to do this work. I live in DC now, and I work with different state directors across the country, moving immigration policy on the state level. We see, especially under the Trump administration, we saw an opportunity where all our state legislation could improve and really protect undocumented immigrants, where the federal government was starting to deport them in masses. So I direct that program, and it's really exciting because I get to connect more to the local organizer and to understand really the challenges that come on a local level, especially as like federal policy continues to move. And this here is actually not from an immigration fight, but from our New York bail reform campaign. So we also do criminal justice work at forward.us. And in New York, for the last 2 years, we've been fighting for bail reform. If you're native to New York, you would know that many families, many folks are incarcerated and because they can't afford bail. So we're really trying to also, destroy bail, because people should not be incarcerated because they can pay $1,000, $50,000. We all know that a system itself is already racialized and racist in itself. So it's here for a long fight. Go ahead, Jam.
Let me unmute myself. So, you said that you want, besides bail reform, because the average family doesn't have, and this is before COVID, did not have $400 in if they had an emergency. Now, during this period of COVID, that number has decreased significantly because a lot of people can't afford rent. You know, if we look at our, they can't afford food because a lot of people have lost their jobs or have had their jobs significantly curtailed, right? And not to mention if they're suffering from COVID themselves. But you mentioned, Pam, that you are really interested in immigration reform. What do you think the best form of immigration reform should be? Because we've seen this president has been trying to terminate DACA. Thank goodness the Supreme Court in June sort of put an end to that. But do you want permanent protections? Do you want a pathway to citizenship? What do you think is the best type of immigration reform, number one? And number two, why is immigration really important to the health of the US or any country? So it's a two-pronged question.
Yeah, I think I cannot answer number one of what does good immigration reform look like without acknowledging, you know, what this administration has been doing and really take advantage of the immigration system itself. Mm-hmm. The immigration system in this country has not been formally updated for like over half a century. We can say even those like bills that have passed in the past and like those big reform bills like from the Reagan era or from the Johnson era, we're still not just and we're still not helpful to and updated to the world that we live in today. What the Trump administration has picked up quickly on is, you know, we have the Department of Homeland Security and ICE that formed as part of the Patriot Act, which was a response after 9/11. And they had taken advantage of that. And before, with the Bush and Obama administration, where they argued that they were, you know, prioritizing quote unquote criminals, they were still separating families. They were still not allowing people to, you know, return to their communities and like be part of the community in itself. Trump administration is has not only categorized every undocumented immigrant as quote unquote criminal, and I'll go into that a little bit later too, but it has any statute like DACA, like TPS, temporary protected status, that is awarded to someone because they are coming to this country after like environmental impacts in their home country. You know, we see after the Haiti earthquake, we see El Salvadorans coming after famines, and they were awarded TPS, temporary protected status. And so the Trump administration is really trying to take away any kind of documentation that people have been using to work. I can only work because I have DACA, and that is literally a work permit. That's all it is. I have a work permit now, and I have some government ID that says this is who she is, this is where she lives, this is her phone number, because now we have all of her records. So when we have a Biden administration, because we need to put all those positive vibes out there, the Biden administration is really facing like the radicalization of the system that was already broken to begin with. They are going to have a system where families by law can be separated, children can be detained in cages. They are inheriting a system where the ICE is not only coming after people with criminal records, but it's also going to protests. We've seen them over the summer. Like, they've been showing up at protests. They've been using technology to identify people that have gone through other protests in the past. So they're inheriting a system that is already even more broken than it was. So really, when we see immigration reform, we have an opportunity under a new administration to talk about what pathway to citizenship can be. But when we used to bring up pathway to citizenship, people would talk in terms of, oh, you know, like no criminal records, like model citizens, the people like pay their own taxes, etc. Right? But what we're seeing now is that the system has always abused people. That even if for some reason someone was in a bar brawl and they were detained for one day and they were a green card holder, that could go against them to become a citizen. So in the old world, when we used to talk about what immigration reform looked like, you know, that person would have been stripped from their own pathway to citizenship. So we really want to talk about pathway to citizenship of like, what is humane pathway to citizenship when we see African workers that have traveled to Peru, not to Peru, to Brazil for the Brazilian World Cup, and they were promised, you know, riches, and they said like, we need to build these stadiums for the Brazilian World Cup, and all of a sudden, no job, no more money, so they had to leave Brazil, travel by foot all the way to the US. And we see a lot of African migrants at the border between Mexico and the United States, you know, with a language barrier, because we're used to talking about immigration, about like something that Spanish speakers have to deal with, you know. We see French Creole, we see Portuguese, and we see so many different languages at that border. So like, what does immigration reform look like when we need to adapt ourselves to this new challenges that have come up in our country, that have developed because of like these powerhouses and the abuses that people have had to live with. People are fleeing their homes because of different environmental impacts. So immigration reform, in my ideal world, should really be a blank slate of, if someone wants to come into this country and start a new life, you know, what kind of pathway to citizenship can we offer? I think there's a clear, there's probably going to be levels, and I really try not to get stuck in that. But if they may argue that if we've already documented DACA recipients and TPS holders, then they're likely to be like the first wave of people that will get a green card, you know, to become citizens. And there's also different arguments, like people that have traveled like through continents, through countries to get here. Many of them, because of different reasons, have lost their documents, like from their home country. So we have to adapt, and that really, I think, is what immigration reform needs to be. But we also have to be smart. Whatever happens in 2021, there's going to be an economic legislation that we need to pass to support the health of our country after COVID-19. And in that economic package, like, we need to argue that folks that have been here for decades are essential workers, have been on the front lines. Of the 700 or nearly 800,000 DACA recipients, 22,000 of them actually are part of the medical workforce too. So they have been literally on the front lines, curing and helping people as we've had our cases with COVID-19 increase across the country. So we need to take advantage of that and really realize that there's multiple layers that we didn't address in our previous fights for immigration reform. And we now have an opportunity to really try to be as fair and as just. And I think the goal is to keep families together. That has been our fight from the very start. Your second question was about the world. Can you repeat that again? Oh, I think you're muted.
I am muted. Okay. So, the second question was that pathway to citizenship. I'm going to paraphrase it and change it a little because your answer sort of gives me another question. Two, do all undocumented people who are coming to the United States or to any country, do they want that pathway to citizenship, or do they want to at some point return home to wherever home might be? So for instance, out of the top 10 countries where people who have TPS are coming from, 3 of those countries, Haiti, Nepal, and Honduras, our government has said it is now, those countries are now ready to accept their people back. Where should they be? So
Yeah,
that's a question. So is it a pathway to citizenship, or is it some form of security, a la Hobbes and all of those thinkers, that we want security?
Mm-hmm. And I want to answer your question, Jam, and I just want to acknowledge that Aiden is typing a question in the box. So Aiden,
okay.
after I answer my question, I'll go to you too.
Okay. That's a good question there, Aiden. Thank you.
So yes, so the current administration has said and is trying to revoke TPS. There are countries that are saying, like Haiti, we're ready to welcome back our citizens. But the reality is that folks have been living here for decades and have formed lives here. And I think a lot of what we feel is like, one of my goals to becoming a citizen is, or even the green card holders, because I want to visit my family in Peru. Like, I have not been able to see them in nearly 20 years. Mm-hmm. So, and a lot of people have been struggling with that. We need to make sure that we know why this is a challenge, and it's because they have this country has the 3 and the 10-year bar, mm-hmm. which means that if you overstayed here like by a day without documents, so you weren't documented for a day, or you became undocumented, you were not here legally for over a year, then even if you try to get by the law that exists, mm-hmm. I would have to go to Peru, and I would have to wait 10 years to set foot in this country, like 10 years. I have friends here. I have family here. I have a career here. Like, how the current system is telling me, Pamela, if you want to be a citizen and do this the right way, like, you just have to leave for 10 years and forget all that you've done existed, because you're not gonna see that at all. And when you're faced with that, it's like, how can you leave? So a lot of people actually were forced to become undocumented. People had the ability to travel back and forth. We had we had laws with Mexico where actually people at the Mexican border could go in and out of the country, and like, they live there and they work here, but all of a sudden the United States say, actually, if you're here, like, you have to have like a specific and another document and pay for that other document. So people found themselves stuck. A lot of people, all of the 11 million undocumented immigrants, a lot of them, and I could say maybe most of them, never wanted to be undocumented. Like, that was never a goal for us. Our goal was, what kind of lifestyle can I create? But this country does not let the current laws does not let for someone to travel or to visit without needing to leave this country for 10 years first, which makes it hard, because then it's a decision to bear of like, then I have to stay here. There's no other way for me to go and like possibly not see my kids again. So, and then to answer a little bit, to talk a little bit more about temporary protected status, uh, people were given TPS, and it was usually every administration, um, you know, renewed it again and expanded the program again for 5 more years, 2 more years. And but what the administrations could have done in the past is also offer people an opportunity to adjust from TPS to green card, or to another status, to adjust from TPS so they were able to travel. Before, people with TPS, they were able to travel, but now they can't because the Trump administration said no. You either like leave forever or like you're stuck here, and maybe you're gonna get detained for however long. So really, people are trying to adjust, but any kind of adjustment or any kind of pathway is derailed by the system itself, because the system has been broken too. Um, and I can go to Aiden next, if you can talk a little bit about how you're conflicted about deportation.
Could you explain that, Aiden, a bit more?
Yeah, I can explain it. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
On one hand, I'm kind of like conflicted because on one hand, like it's sad that people get deported, but at the other hand, like those people have kind of like, I'm not like trying to say they're bad people, like they're nice people and whatnot, but they've kind of broken the law by not, doing it through the legal way. So on the one hand, I'm like, I don't want to deport these people from our country, but on the other hand, they've broken the law, and they do have to, like, there is punishment for breaking the law, though, whether you like it or not. I mean, I don't, that's why I'm conflicted, because they're breaking the law, but I don't want them to leave, like, I think America is a good country, and I want people to come, but I want them to come the legal way. I know many of them, most of them undocumented people are nice people.
Aiden, do you have examples of people you know that have come here the legal way?
I know. I think my friend Martin. He's from Ecuador. His family was they met. His parents met each other in UC Berkeley in California. So Martin has dual citizenship. So he kind of came legally. I know it's not exactly like that, but I know the legal process is like crazy and like bloated and stuff. And that's why I do agree that we do need to reform the system. And that's why I feel conflicted about deportation. Like, on one hand, like, yes, they're breaking the law, but on the other hand, they've worked so hard to get here. I understand the blood, sweat, and tears.
Can I add into this? So what I have found in some of my research, that even if someone has naturalized and become a citizen, if they still can be deported back to their country of origin. And this has happened from 1860 to now. So even if they have naturalized, even if they have followed a pathway to citizenship, that citizenship isn't like a birthright citizenship, which you hold and you have almost forever. I'm sure that they could find a way to expel people if they wanted to, but for naturalized citizens, it's not as permanent as we might think of it. So.
Yeah, I think I'll try to answer both together. There's to immigration, there's layers. Yeah. And I also want to say I speak from the perspective of someone that has a lived experience with immigration. I have become an expert because I have gone through multiple cycles and campaigns. But my expertise is still not what you may expect from an immigration lawyer. So there's definitely there's different knowledge that we possess. To Aiden's point, I think Aiden, you were answering your question yourself a little bit. It's hard to even come here the right way, because the right way means that you probably have to have a master's degree. Yeah, my cat's here. You probably have to have a master's degree. If your friends met at a school, we see the administration right now, and you maybe have seen this in the summer with some of your friends. The Trump administration was trying to stop any international students from staying here. And it was actually an uproar because we have thousands of international students that help fund for some of the scholarships that some of you have, right?
Do you know why? You know why he did that exactly?
Sorry, Aiden, I'm losing you. Can you say that again?
You know why President Trump did that?
It's part of their agenda. The Trump administration has been. I'm not apologizing for my cat here, just as you shouldn't
I know it's
apologize
fine. I
for
understand. It
your
happens.
system, your current work or study from home. Such is life. But the Trump administration actually is taking advantage of these things because they are working with extremist and organizations that believe in only birthright and birthright citizenship only for those that look white and European. And part of their fight against international students was that we see many international students coming from Asia. A lot of the international students in our country come particularly from China. It's, you know, we can argue about racism all day long, but the fact of the matter is that some of the policies that the administration has been implementing are biased from the start because they are founded by and they are tied to his new advisors that come from eugenic driven orgs like FAIR, FAIR. And you'll see that very often. So if you can say, and we've been screaming to the world about this since 2015, this has been their agenda all along. One of the reasons why people have, you know, latched themselves onto Trump is because he's easily persuadable. He likes power. And people have taken advantage of that to drive this agenda since 2015.
I know.
At the beginning of his presidential campaign, he quoted, like, Mexicans are coming here and they're rapists. Like, there was no doubt that this has been their agenda from the start.
I mean, also, there are other reasons besides that because many of them people were dissatisfied with the political establishment, and Trump was able to persuade them and stuff like how Caesar did with the Roman people against the Senate during the Roman Republic as well. But also I heard like Obama also deported a lot of people as well. I don't know how true that is, but I've heard like rumors that Obama deported, and also he did subvert Congress's power over immigration authority by creating DACA. So that's why the DACA people unfortunately are in that legal limbo because Obama subverted Congress because Congress was all Republicans back then. So I don't know. I feel like that's also that.
Aiden, I don't think we're arguing about what's existed. Like, we know that.
I know.
What
I'm not
we're
trying to
arguing
argue.
is like we are in a system that is broken and is tearing families apart. You know, when we see, like, we feel sorry for people being deported, it's because there's part of our humanity that is questioning, why are we tearing kids away from their parents? Why are we grabbing a 2-month-old child? And I have seen so many cases, and I have been at the border, you know, trying to help families in 2018. Wow. So, you know, this is not an argument about who has done what and what is being done. I think this is an argument of like, our system is broken.
Yes,
and I think we have an opportunity to fix that a bit more and a bit better, and to be justifiable, and to also adapt itself to, you know, to our reality of people are migrating for multiple reasons, and part of it is environmentalism. So yeah, I mean, if there's a conflict with deportation for folks, I'm happy to take this offline because I also don't want this to be a one-on-one conversation. I know you all are trying to have, and I think I see another question as well. But so I'm happy to take this offline. I'm happy to share additional resources as well in reading materials, even though you may not want to read. I may share like a video. So I'm going to type my email address too. And you can reach out to me there. And I think Peter's asking if I could speak about the benefits or responsibilities that come with citizenship, if undocumented immigrants can get Social Security, pay taxes, etc., is voting the only benefit to be naturalized? No, it's not. So I think I'll take this bit by bit. First, undocumented immigrants already paying taxes. Then they part of the myth is that they're not, but I think one of the things that we learn pretty quickly is that you have to pay taxes. Like people want to get right by the law. The law is just not trying to help you. That's the problem. So folks are already paying taxes annually. Folks also pay taxes like when they go shopping. So we contribute to the fabric of our economy in this country. I think so. For instance, I have a Social Security number because the Social Security number is in a way, my work permit, but it's not, and it says only to be used for work. So there's different things that we can argue with, but if I were to retire, I do not have access to those Social Security benefits because I'm not a citizen. So I'm actually giving all citizens more money for your future retirement funds. Not for me. And then what other responsibilities come with citizenship? Honestly, I remember sitting in Dr. Jam's class and she was asking a question about, what are some of the things that citizens can do that other folks can't in this country? And one of them was serving a jury with your peers. And like, I want to do that. I want to serve in the jury with my peers because I believe in my community and in protecting my community. I believe that juries, we can have a different conversation about the criminal legal system, but I believe that we can help our community and be part of that growth and that reform for a person. And folks, undocumented people that are undocumented with TPS or DACA, they believe that we are part of this community. We are just not seen as part of it. We are seen as people that fund it. Literally all the money I earn is going through your social benefits, but not mine. We want to be seen whole. And there's different layers. Voting is part of it because voting means that we gain representation. Voting means that I no longer have to persuade my friends of this is the best candidate you can fight for, but I can persuade them and then I can vote myself too. So I'm also gaining representation that way. And to Peter's point, it is a responsibility to be a citizen because to be a citizen is to really pay attention to what is happening around you. And while we have been doing that, we have not been heard. So really is to lift up our voices. Jam, I don't know if you have a question or if I should try to tackle others.
I'm just giving information. So if you want to go look at what the Federation for Immigration Reform, which is an extremist group that's been around since 1979, trying to limit who comes into the United States. Right? So it's not just something that is new here at all. Even though someone like Stephen Miller, who is one of Trump's advisors, is also very much a nationalist when we doesn't want immigration. There's a book that I just started reading called Hate Monger, which is about how he became such a nationalist himself. So there's a lot of stuff out there. So Aiden, that might help you. And then going back to Peter's question about why would someone want to be a citizen? And I think it goes back to that question of being secure. Not living your life in fear that you might be deported.
Not living your life like Supreme Court decision through Supreme Court decision. Many of us were very anxious about the June SCOTUS decision that said the Trump administration was wrong in the way they ended DACA, and DACA itself is good. Because we've seen the history of this country is to not be just to the vulnerable. So that was a big win. And I would argue that it was a big win because it was also happening during the uproar, the uprising, and the protest for Black Lives Matter. And, you know, that itself demonstrated to the court that people were ready to fight back. So it's going to be a book written in the future about that. But yeah, none of us want to live without the fear of being deported. I have had ICE at my door try to come in and argue that they wanted to show me a picture of someone. I asked for a warrant. They say they laughed. Isn't it part of, you know, the law in this country, regardless of your citizenship status, that you cannot be detained or you cannot be searched without a warrant? They laughed at me when I asked for a warrant. I pushed back and I said, we are not letting you in without a warrant. And they had to leave because I had a lawyer on the phone. That was at 5 a.m. on a Monday. Other people are caught up at worse times. And I am very privileged that I was trained to react. Other people don't have these resources. People like go to their jobs and they come home and that's all they do. So they don't even know how to protect themselves. So yes, becoming a citizen is also about security. It's about protection. And it's about feeling reassured that you can be with your family.
Does that help? So I would say that most people, if a police officer or someone from Homeland Security showed up at their doorstep, would not know what to do, would not have the wherewithal to say, I have a lawyer on the phone, you need a warrant. You know, that we basically give away our right to privacy all the time. So how do people learn what their rights are and how to demark them and have the backbone to stand up to ICE?
I think the backbone exists in us, in all of us. You know, it is part of our, I think, the pain and the inheritance of the history that when we're pushed too hard, our backbone shows up. And there's organizations that are also doing the work to train people about know your rights. And know your rights doesn't just benefit undocumented immigrants, it benefits anyone and everyone here. So if you'd like to know more about know your rights and tools to share and to learn, you can go to informimmigrant.com, and it's also on as inmigranteinformado.com. The Know Your Rights resources actually exist in, I think, 10 languages as well. So you can browse through that and print them out, you know, hand them to folks. If you're gonna go to a protest yourself, read the Know Your Rights pamphlets because it is important as well. And you do, and part of the work that I do is identifying some of those local organizations that need extra funds in order to do the outreach to their local community. So, you know, we cannot be successful in the long run if we're not paying attention, or if we just get stuck in DC. Like, we can't get stuck in DC and the politics of DC. There's people, like everyday people don't live in politics. Everyday people get up, work, come home. So we need to do the outreach to them.
Yeah, locally there are a whole bunch of groups that are working for immigrant rights too. Are there? Katerina, you have a question.
Katerina.
Do you want to ask that, Kat?
Sure, no problem. I was just wondering if you could talk more about like the actual immigration process at the border, because I think you mentioned you lived in Texas for a little bit, and I've just heard a lot of information, a lot of conflicting information, I guess, about the way that officials, I guess, go about the process of I guess, dealing with immigrants who show up at the border. And I've also heard a lot about how they get arrested or detained before they can even like reach a city where they can declare asylum if they need to or anything, and they just get detained at the border for, you know, extraordinary amounts of time. And I was just wondering if you could speak on that, if you have any, you know, information on that.
Mm-hmm. So I lived in Texas in 2014, Harris County, which is hundreds of miles away from the border. I didn't experience that, but it was during the unaccompanied children conversations that we were having in that midterm here. So I can't speak of what happened at the border, but I can speak on what we've come to learn from different reports. I think, Katerina, you're right in saying there's conflicted information. We have different areas where people can declare themselves as asylum seekers at the border, and this is part of a worldwide agreement that we've had. Sorry. And after COVID-19, some of those areas actually were shut off as well. Well, Trump shut off some of them. After COVID-19 quarantine period, more of them were shut off. So we're really seeing 3 sites at the border with Texas being open, and those are more of the brutal sites as well. We've seen reports, and this is from colleagues that have actually traveled to the border. I cannot travel at the border without risking my life because I could be detained even though I have DACA. So I run a risk of being there myself. But some of my US citizen colleagues have been able to travel on both sides of the border, and they've seen people get arrested, people get detained. There is a meter system that instead of actually filing people in as they come and seek asylum, they are asking people to grab a number. And the number, we're probably, they're probably at number 200 because they're only filing 5 cases a day when we have thousands of folks that have grabbed a number already. So that's what we're calling the meter system. The meter system is not adapted to what we're seeing here. There is also now a third country agreement. The third country agreement with Mexico, what it really means is that instead of people in their own rights trying to seek asylum at the border with the US, Mexican authorities now are trying to stop them from getting to that area. So people are like navigating dangerous routes to get there to begin with. And they're trying to have border agreements with Central American countries so that asylum seekers stay in the Central American countries instead of Mexico. So we're seeing like different tiers for people to arrive to the US as well. Part of the challenge here is also what I mentioned a little bit earlier, that we see a language barrier as well. People speak multiple languages, they speak multiple native tongues as well. So it's become a challenge to even communicate. So some of the work that we have been doing is identifying human rights organizations that are equipped with a healthcare system so that they can welcome people in their camp, provide them with care with the flu shot, and provide them with the necessary quarantine that they need to adapt during the pandemic as well. So luckily enough, one of the camps that we work with actually has not seen any COVID-19 cases, because that was one of our biggest fears at the beginning. But this is just one of many camps that happen. And you can imagine the fear that people live with, not just escaping what was their life, but also in fear of the pandemic, in fear of COVID-19 and what it could mean if they have it. I hope that answers your question, Katerina. Sorry, did I say your name right?
Yes, it
Yeah.
does. Thanks. That makes sense.
Mhm.
So Teresa has a question about becoming a naturalized citizen and how extensive it is it, and does that the whole process discourage people? Right now, we're also seeing that it is actually a very expensive process
Mhm.
to come to the United States and to get a green card. You need a goodly amount of money. At one point, during the Obama administration, you needed about $10,000 so that you because you and a job because the administration didn't want you to become a burden on our system. And that's similar to a lot of places. You cannot immigrate to a lot of places if they feel that you are going to become a burden. So it's not just the U.S.
Mhm. And but part of that is that the Trump administration has done public charge as well. So if you at any point were considered a burden, no, sorry, the if you're a burden to the U.S., the list of what that means has expanded under the Trump administration. So they try to say like before it was if you yourself as someone that's trying to get naturalized, use SNAP, then you were once a burden to the U.S., so you were not sustaining yourself. What the Trump administration is doing is that if you're naturalized born child, U.S. citizen child, receives SNAP or like school lunch, you were a burden, even though like your citizen child has the right to have that. So they are trying to identify different ways that becoming a citizen, it gets harder and harder. It's not just the monetary fee, but they've also proposed, and I think it was just passed either if not last week, next week, the fee to get naturalized to be doubled. So it's thousands and thousands of dollars. It's not just like the 10K. My one of my friends is trying to adapt to that, but it's nearly $20,000 to do that. Before, it used to just be in the hundreds. So the process itself, there's more barriers than there were in the past. We are actively seeing them try to stop the naturalization process. There's also intimidation factors that have risen in the last couple of years as well, and different campaigns too. So it takes long, and right now it is even more troubling than it used to be. One of the things that immigrant groups, or I guess more political organizations than anything, they have been doing outreach to green card holders because they want to make sure that green card holders can gain like their citizenship, because even green card holders now are at risk of deportation. So we're really trying to do the outreach to the public.
Are there other questions out there? I'm just replying right now to Aiden, who is making some statements that he needs to do a little bit of research and about fraudulent voting. And the Heritage Foundation, which is a conservative group, has basically found that there is very little fraudulent voting. There might be election fraud, but that is not the same as fraudulent voting. So I'm just putting that aside there right now. But Aiden, you're more than welcome to come visit with me and we can go through all of this. And yes, as a naturalized citizen, you can get deported. In my human rights class yesterday, we were talking about how ICE and Homeland Security can stop anyone within 100 miles of the border and ask for their papers. And most of us, how could you prove that you are an American citizen or you're not an American citizen? That you're here as a visitor if you're visiting. How many of you, do you carry around your Passport, mine is upstairs someplace. You carry around your, and basically only 40% of Americans actually have a passport. People in your age group at Marist, because we tend to send more students abroad, they do have their passport, so that's a good thing, because studying abroad actually allows you to see your own country better. And the second way that you can prove that you're a citizen is via your birth certificate. And as I told my class yesterday, there is no way I'm going to ever get down to my original weight, which was 6 pounds 1 ounce, right? And I'm never going to be there again. So how can somebody look at my birth certificate and go, oh, look, this person born in Miami Beach many years ago, who was 6 pounds 1 ounce, is this person here? How can they make that connection, right? But those are the two ways that we say that you can prove your citizenship, right? So people within 100 miles of the border, that means all of Florida, almost all of our population centers, Chicago, Buffalo, Portland, Boston, New York, Washington, right? All, San Antonio, LA. I'm sorry, I'm skipping a whole around the globe, around the country here, but you get the point that people might be traveling from New York to Buffalo and get stopped on Amtrak, and ICE is boarded at Amtrak in Syracuse and asks for people's papers, right? And if you're traveling within the state, are you going to carry your papers? And this actually goes back to something that happened right after 9/11. A lot of people were saying, well, maybe we need a national security, national ID card, so that we can tell the Americans from the non-Americans, right? And I'm going to say, if we had a national identity card, there will be people with fake national identity cards, just like I know that there are some students that have fake IDs. Just saying. Oh, by the way, if you change your license, that is actually a felony, because your driver's license doesn't belong to you, it's state property. Just an aside. And that's a felony, so if you change your birthday on a driver's license. Who knew? Right? So yes, to answer San Lisa's question, yes, you can get deported, right? Unfortunately, right? And it's not a new thing. Emma Goldman was deported, right? And deported to Russia, which she hadn't lived in Russia since she was 10 or 11 years old, right? Are there other questions for Pamela? Oh, Shanae, I see that you raised your hand. You have to unmute yourself.
I have. Hi. Just with, I think, everything kind of going on in the world right now, I often do feel quite hopeless, and I feel like my actions don't really make much of a difference. Obviously I can't even vote here, but are there actions we can take? Obviously we can educate ourselves and other people around us, but even through your organization, are there things that we can do to help the process? Yeah.
I go to bed at night and say, this is their strategy. The Trump administration, their biggest strategy is to tear me apart. If they tear me apart, I become depressed. If I become depressed, I have no energy. I have no mental capacity to think, to help. So I just remind myself it's part of the strategy. I cannot fall in this hole, and I have to get up, and I have to fight back. Fighting back hurts and it's a lot, but it's very rewarding. I would say first things first, the site that I shared, informedimmigrant.com, is actually part of our C3. We are a C4 organization, but the C3 informedimmigrant.com means that it's non-political. We have different ways for you to look up your local organization that supports the immigrant community. Sometimes we see battles in the city or in the state. We have heard about sanctuary cities, and essentially that means that no one, including citizens, can be detained or searched without a warrant, especially by ICE agents. So join that fight. We need you in that fight. There's state campaigns as well. In New York, COVID-19, we see many essential workers in the front lines. What are we doing to support those essential workers? Many of them are also undocumented immigrants. So there have been laws that have been introduced, but the Governor Cuomo doesn't want to pass it. And listen, we could easily in New York State get millionaire tax and pay for all the debt of New York, but that's not happening anytime soon. So what else can we do? We can join the fight for the New York Heroes Act. The New York Heroes Act actually would force the Labor Department and the Health Department to make sure that any essential worker has the right equipment, therefore decreasing their chances of contacting COVID-19. There is the New York Burial Act. Many New Yorkers have had someone that they've lost to COVID-19. The New York Burial Act will award every New Yorker, regardless of their immigration status, $3,000 to bury their dead.
Mm-hmm.
That's 2 paychecks for some people. So there are some fights on the state level, on the city level that you can join. I would say definitely go to informedimmigrant.com, look up your local organization and ask them what they need. Sometimes, honestly, they just need you to show up at a place and walk with someone to court, because ICE is showing up at courts, and if they think bias, if they think someone is undocumented, they're going to go after them. You can help walk them to court and protect them as well. So there are many ways that you can really make an action and create an impact. And I would say in some ways we have lived through different waves of this, and I think after every wave we win some, we lose a lot, and this is just another one of them, and we need to win a lot more than lose them. So we really need your energy. Also do mental health care. I have a therapist. I made my job pay for a therapist because I said I can't do this by myself. So look at Maris. I actually used to go to therapy at Maris too. So look for, mental health resources. Inform Immigrant also has some mental health resources free that you can use and connect to people. Take some breaks, drink water. My cat was drinking my water, so I can't drink it anymore. But drink water. It helps. Stay hydrated. Get your skin glow. I can go on and on.
Okay. So there's another, AJ, you have a question? Do you want to reframe that short? So it's a short to the point question, but you have to unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so it's really more about a matter of convincing those who, we've established that, immigration is a good thing for the U.S., people deserve to be treated fairly by the system. But there's also, a lot of pushback on, the exact concepts that we're talking about here. Trump isn't president for no reason. There are a lot of people who do not believe the U.S. is made better by immigration. How do we convince those people that they should still get behind this immigration reform to fix the system to make sure that it does treat people fairly?
So I like to argue against that because actually 87% of Americans believe that Dreamers need a pathway to citizenship and support immigration reform. The 13%, they're just loud. And frankly, we don't need the 13%. We're always going to have a 13%. We don't need to win them all. I always tell my team, why are you fighting with this person? Do you need them to win? Like, do you need their vote? No, you don't. Go into the person that can be persuadable and supports this based on their family values, based on economic values. They just need to be vocal and speak up about it. So our reality is that there's more than 80% of Americans that believe in immigration reform. The big fight, and a little bit to your point of how do we make sure that we don't encounter this again, is we need to adapt our system to the new world. We need to adapt our system and realize that many people are traveling from country to country because of their environmental impact in their homes, because of famine, because of lack of water. Many people are traveling for jobs. So what do people are migrant? Like, we migrate to different countries to countries. So we just don't want to get stuck in one place. Like, do you want to get stuck at home with your parents the rest of your life? No, you want to go somewhere and explore. But you also want to know that you can go back to your parents and visit at any time. Don't bring your laundry, though. You should learn to do your laundry by this point. But like, honestly, people just don't want to get stuck. People want to be motion. Like, we like motion, we like movement. So in order to prevent another point like this, another challenge like this, is adapt our system so that people can gain movement. And because some of the people probably don't even want to stay here, they just want to have the ability to live as humans with decency. They don't want to live in chains. They want to live like real people and pay for their own airplane.
So you actually, Pam, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to step on you. You actually opened a really important question, is where do human rights live? Are they portable? Do they come with us as we travel around, as we migrate for whatever reasons, whether it's environmental or economic or for a better life for our children? Or are they government granted and therefore we have to always ask a government for our rights? Which is so Celia Benevieve says that human rights should come with us. But most of us say, as we look at where human rights live, they are government granted. I don't know if that's a question per se that you can answer.
I don't think I've ever been asked the question this way. I just know that it makes sense to me that human rights move with us.
Mm-hmm.
It makes sense to me that if I seek help, like, I won't be rejected because a law says no. It makes sense that someone can listen to me and make my case. And that's what asylum seekers do. Like, they want someone to listen so they can make their case. So I do believe that as the world sees different people move from place to place seeking asylums as refugees, they are seeking, like, for their case to be heard. And we should be creating laws where we can hear them, not where we can shut them off, not where we can abandon them. So yeah, I do think human rights move with us, as they should. Like, honestly, we don't know what this world's going to look like 50 years from now. We just know that the way that we're dealing with things is not the way we should. So we need to improve that as well.
Are there other questions, comments, concerns? I'm not seeing anything.
We have learned everything today, apparently.
Yes. or at least you've given us a lot of food for thought in how we go about and we deal with the fact that all of us are basically immigrants unless we have Native Americans in our heritage, because they've been here in the United States longer than, well, for about 10,000 years, right? And most European Americans have only been here for 400-ish years. African,
And some folks were forced here.
yes.
Forced here. So I think that's something that the immigration movement is more vocal about as well. And it's something that's going to help us in the long run. We, you know, we talk about intersectionality and how everything's intersectional, but people actually don't act on it. But right now I see more organizations acting on the different layers. And at the heart of it is human rights. And yeah, I think if I have anything else to add is that I was a college student ready to graduate Marist in spring of 2012. And I had no career path because I couldn't work. And you know, somehow things happened and things really worked out because other people, other dreamers were fighting the fight for me. So if you have not joined your fight, other people are doing it already. You just have to open up your ears, listen to how they're doing it, and join them. It takes a lot of courage, but it is very rewarding.
Well, thank you. Would you all join me in thanking her?
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
very much.
you, as always, for enlightening us and giving us a lot of food for thought. Okay?
Happy to.
Happy to. So go enjoy your Saturdays.
Bye,
Thank
y'all.
you both.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks again.
Bye.
And we're out of here. Thank you.